Hey, and welcome back to Miss Kitty's Wild West Adventures. They say you don't know what it's like until you've walked a mile in someone else's shoes. Well, you might change your tune after you hear this coming story. How did this man end up wearing shoes made from the skin of another human being? Stick around because we're going to unravel this bizarre and chilling tale. Once on display at the Carbon County Museum in Rawlins, Wyoming, are a pair of men's shoes. Adorned with two colors of leather, these one-of-a-kind shoes were once worn by John Eugene Osborne, the third governor of the state of Wyoming. You see, prior to entering politics, Osborne had been a doctor. On March 22, 1881, he was summoned to a telegraph pole in downtown Rawlins, where a man was wildly struggling at the end of a rope. The man at the end of the rope was George Francis Warden, otherwise known as George Manus, George Parrot, or, as his friends called him, Big Nose George. George began his life as a criminal by stealing horses. This soon led to robbing stagecoaches. Then, in August of 1878, he and his gang planned to hijack a Union Pacific Railroad car. They planned on loosening the railroad ties, causing a derailment. Fortunately for UPR, a sharp-eyed foreman discovered the loosened spike, repaired it, and contacted the authorities, who quickly sent out a posse. George and his gang fled into Rattlesnake Canyon at the base of Elk Mountain. Soon they were tracked down by Deputy Robert Widowfield and Detective Henry Tip Vincent. A gunfight ensued, which left both lawmen dead. So our boy George then added murder to his rap sheet. He managed to evade authorities for over 2 years. During that time, he continued to rob payrolls and unsuspecting travelers as well. But old George was a talker. He'd have a few drinks and start running his mouth, bragging about the train he had almost robbed and the 2 men whom he had killed. Finally, in September of 1880, Big Nose George was captured and brought back to Wyoming Territory to stand trial. In early 1881, he was found guilty and sentenced to hang. 10 days before his execution, however, George managed to escape his jail cell. He struck the jailer over his head and ran toward the exit. What he didn't account for, though, was the jailer's wife chasing him with the jailer's revolver. She fired a single shot into the air, and local men ran to her aid. Once George was recaptured, the local men decided not to wait 10 more days. They tied his hands behind his back, placed a noose around his neck, and forced him up and off of a ladder. Because of the hastiness of the lynching, the rope did not provide enough torque to break George's neck, and he struggled for several minutes, ripping off an ear in the process, until he finally choked to death. And when he did, Dr. Osborne was there to declare him dead. After a couple of days, when no one came to claim the body, Dr. Osborne and another doctor, Thomas McGee, claimed George's corpse for medical study. Osborne made a death mask of Big Nose George, where we can clearly see why he was given his nickname. Also, you will note the absence of an ear, caused by the misplaced noose around his neck. Osborne also had the outlaw skinned and ordered that the skin be tanned and made into a doctor's bag and a pair of shoes. Dr. McGee studied George's brain. Finally, Osborne gave the skull cap to his 14-year-old protege, Lillian Heath, who would later become Wyoming's first female physician. Over the years, she used it as an ashtray, a pen holder, and as a doorstop. Osborne went on to become governor, where it is said that he actually wore the shoes to his 1893 inauguration. The town quickly forgot about George until And you guys know there's always an until in these stories. Until 1950, when workers were excavating a new department store in downtown Rollins. They unearthed a whiskey barrel. Inside were human remains, with the skull cap cleanly removed. Workers were sent to Lillian Heath's home, where they discovered she still had possession of the skull cap. The two halves of Big Nose George's skull were briefly reunited. The bottom half now resides with the shoes at the Carbon County Museum in Rollins, and the top half is housed at the Union Pacific Railroad Museum in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Have you been to either of these places? Are the shoes and the skull still on display? Leave a comment down below and let me know. And in the meantime, please remember to give this video a thumbs up, and if you're not already, subscribe to Miss Kitty's Wild West Adventures. And in the meantime, I'll catch you on down the trail. And this, my friends, is where the shoes hit the pavement. I'm off to the next story.